What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Hoax Series. I'm your host, Tyler, joined by my co-host, James. Let's go ahead and get into it. All right, James. Topic of discussion for today for the Hoax Series. Calisthenics for muscle growth. Hoax, my man.
I'm going to go with hype, but with a lot of caveats, which we'll get into. But I'm going to start with hype.
Okay. I'm also going to agree with hype, but I don't think it's optimal.
I would 100% agree. I don't think it's optimal. Is it possible? Absolutely. Optimal, though, I think, again, what we're looking at is, your muscles and, we've had to deal with fixing this idea of muscle confusion. We've had to correct so many people and kind of explain it's not actually a thing. Your muscles don't really care if the weight is your body weight or an external load from a dumbbell, a barbell, a sandbag. Yep. All your muscles know is that they're being asked to do more work than they were previously. If you can achieve that with calisthenics, with the correct volume, you can gain muscle mass.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's well said. I love the simplicity behind that. You're asking the body. It doesn't quite literally take a look into this, what am I doing today? Well, it's calisthenics, so I'm going to kind of respond to calisthenics, and I'm going to kind of respond to weight training. It's, like you said, is the stimulus sufficient enough? Is it recruiting enough of the muscle fiber types that we're looking for hypertrophy? Not to get too far down into the weeds, but again, is it heavy enough to stimulate the muscle fibers that we're looking for hypertrophy, to be specific? If the answer is yes, then what you are doing probably doesn't matter as much. Now, is it increasingly more difficult to target those muscle fibers specifically in the lower body with calisthenics? I think it is. I think it's really difficult and probably time-consuming to hit those muscle fibers the way that you could with resistance training.
Exactly. I think, there's two examples that always come to mind, which is, like you said, is things like lower body. You start having to do incredibly high volume, which is very time-consuming.
Yep.
And then the other big one is looking at pull-ups, right? So we know that pull-ups is dependent, one, partially on strength, but also on body mass, right? So when you're taking a look, for example, at, guys that are 250, right, or more, and so you see some of these high-level bodybuilders, you're just not able, right, because of physics and the levers necessary to just crank out pull-ups. And this is why you'll see they do things like lat pull-downs, because, again, I can control the volume and the load and the number of reps a lot easier to elicit that hypertrophic response. Whereas if I say, well, just do pull-ups, well, you're kind of limited to how many pull-ups you can do. Now, again, we can add weight, but are you really just doing calisthenics at that point? Again, you're really doing what we'd call a bodyweight movement, but I think now you're kind of trying to cheat the system by adding, again, that external load.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the other limitation that is potentially there for calisthenics outside of the lower body is different angles of pull or push to target specific muscle groups as well. You have to get very creative, and I do believe that the entry to calisthenics might be simple, meaning you can, if you have enough of a knowledge basis on how to progress and regress exercises and change the lever systems, meaning how to make them easier or more difficult, then I think calisthenics is absolutely doable. But I really do believe that there is a limitation when it comes to the simplicity of it, meaning it might get boring for your average population over time. I'm not saying it's a boring training regime. I just think that doing the same things over and over might become a little boring too. So that's just something to also consider. But again, that's now starting to get a little off topic. So let me go ahead and bring it right back to where we were, which is, can you gain muscle doing calisthenics? The answer is yes. I do think it's a little bit more of a limitation, or it might be more difficult to get total body hypertrophy from calisthenics versus resistance training. So I'm gonna go with hype still, but the hype is a tentative, and it has, like you said, some caveats with it.
Yep, I think you summarized it nicely. I'm going to stay with hype with those caveats, and like you said, right, I think you kind of need that additional knowledge of how to program and plan while understanding, right, the limitations of those calisthenics, and that it might become a little repetitive long term.
For sure.